Do you have any other plans while you're here in the city? Ash answered for them all as he reached up and stroked Pikachu's fur. Well, before we head out I'd like to stop by the fighting dojo here in the city and give it a try. I've heard they've got some pretty strong fighting Pokémon and I happen to have a fighting type myself that trains hard all the time who I'm sure would love a good match or two. Do you have any place to stay in the meantime? Helen asked in concern. Yeah, Ash answered with a sigh. But we don't always like staying in Pokémon centers because even though their nightly rooms are usually free, we prefer staying at more private places when the centers themselves are super busy like right now with the contest crowd in town. We'll probably just stay one more night and then leave tomorrow after I challenge the dojo. Helen placed her hand on her husband's arm and then asked while looking at Ash and the others, "Honey, the gym still has extra bedrooms here that we had put in when Sabrina became the gym leader, right?" Gerald put a hand to the top of his head and looked up in thought. "Yes, I'm rather certain we do. Why?" Sabrina however seemed to catch on to what her mother was getting at as she smiled and spoke up, "I think that would be a very nice idea, Mother." She then looked to Ash and his friends. "Would you consider staying with us here instead before you leave?" Gerald caught on finally and smiled widely himself. "Yes, I think that's a great idea and it's the least we can do for you kids after all you did for us. It's not like I can take my family back to that tiny little cabin right now anyway, so we'll all be staying here as well until we can make other arrangements." Ash shared a look with his friends and, seeing no complaint from any of them, looked back at the two adults and Sabrina. "Are you sure you wouldn't mind? I mean, is there room? I don't want any of us to be in the way." Gerald shook his head. "Nonsense, young man, there are at least 2 decent-sized rooms in this gym besides Sabrina's and we only need 1. Mine and my wife's room is big enough to accommodate the 3 of us, and as long as some of you don't mind sleeping on the furniture, the guest bedroom we had installed is big enough for all of you." Ash looked at his friends again and Misty just shrugged. "I don't mind." "Yeah, me neither," Giselle agreed. "Ditto," Brock seconded with a nod. Soledad even gave her own opinion. "I don't mind either, that is as long as you 4 don't mind having me around for another day or so." Ash looked at the red-headed Pokémon coordinator. "I don't mind at all, Soledad, but why do you want to stick around? Don't you have another contest to get to?" She just shrugged however and shook her head. "Not at this moment. The next and closest contest, that I would prefer to compete in at least, isn't for another month or so in Fuchsia City." A smile crossed Soledad's lips as she placed a hand on Ash's shoulder then. "And besides, I've grown to like all of you and would rather enjoy seeing you challenge that dojo tomorrow, Ash." Ash and his friends shared a smile which showed a unanimous agreement had been reached as he turned back to Sabrina's family and nodded. "All right, sure, we'd love to stay, thank you." Helen clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it." She then drained her teacup and then set it down. "Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but after such a long ordeal and not having access to one in so long, I am in desperate need of a shower and a fresh change of clothes." The way that everyone else pulled at their clothes and sniffed them at the exact same time, which made for a rather humorous sight, showed that her statement was shared by the rest of the group present. "Yeah, I could definitely go for a nice, warm shower," Soledad announced as she drank down her own tea. "Ah, me too," Misty agreed while Giselle nodded in agreement. "A shower sounds great, but I think afterwards we need to head to the Pokémon Center so we can empty our rooms out," Brock advised in his ever-thinking, ever-prepared mindset that was greatly appreciated by his companions. "And we need to get our Pokémon taken care of by Nurse Joy too," Ash added. "Especially mine." Sabrina nodded. "I agree with Ash. If my memories are as accurate as they appear to be, my Pokémon took a real beating in our recent match and I would like to have them looked at as well. It's the least I can do to show them that I still care for them after the years of cold treatment they received when I was otherwise mentally indisposed." A small smile appeared then as she closed her eyes and looked down. "I would also like to congratulate my Abra on finally evolving. It's been a long time coming and I would like to see Kadabra for myself instead of simply through memories." Gerald stood up. "Well, I guess it's decided then, we'll all clean up and then go take a trip to the Pokémon Center together. Afterwards maybe we can all go and get something to eat in the city. 3 years of living by myself eating canned food and bread has left me hungry for something a little more substantial, and as luck would have it, I still have more than enough credits saved from years of running my own business to afford to treat all of us with no issues." With plans for the rest of the day laid out and agreed upon by all present, everyone left the kitchen and headed back down the hallway that led to Sabrina's now destroyed room. However, instead of going that way, they took another hallway that eventually ended at a dead end with 2 doors on either side of the hall. Sabrina and her parents took the right room, which led to Gerald and Helen's own quarters, while Ash and his friends took the left. Entering into a rather spacious and luxurious one-room suite beyond that had a large bed set up at the far wall across the room, a dresser right beside of it serving as the nightstand, 2 long couches facing each other in the middle of the large space, and a bathroom situated to the far left. Deciding to just get clean now and redress back at the Pokémon Center when they got their stuff, Ash and the others took turns showering using bathing supplies already provided in the bathroom, while Ghastly and Pikachu just crashed. The former doing so in the darkest place he could find in the room, while the latter just laid down on the bed and sprawled himself out with a sigh of comfort. The last day, nearly 2, had been long and full of hardships with absolutely no denial. A series of perilous events that left everyone in a state of physical and mental exhaustion that only rest and sleep would cure, but in the end, a massive sense of relief and happiness was felt underneath of it all. Relief that the danger of Haunter's final dark plague was finally over, and happiness that a long-stricken family had been reunited. It was hard to say what lay in store over the course of what remained of the day or even the next one after that, but it was however safe to say that everyone felt confident the worst of Ash's Saffron City Gym challenge turned nightmare was finally behind them. Now was a time of relaxation and perhaps even a healthy dose of celebration for all involved, and Arceus willing, that was exactly what was going to happen. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX stretched his arms above his head, still in his black sleeping shorts and shirt with Pikachu looking equally as sleepy from atop his shoulder. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the messy-haired trainer arrived in the main hallway of the gym and then took the one directly across from him that led towards the kitchen. All the while, he had a slight smile on his face from the memories of the night before that played through his head. After having visited the Pokémon Center, checked out of their rooms and left their Pokémon with Nurse Joy, Ash, his friends and Sabrina and her family left to go to a simple little restaurant downtown that served several different types of food like soups, sandwiches, pasta, seafood and even a salad bar. Over dinner, the 8 of them spent their time talking, getting to know one another better, sharing stories and even trading the occasional joke and bouts of laughter. However, the greatest thing for Ash personally was seeing just how happy that Sabrina and her family obviously were together. In fact, even though seeing the formerly stoic and unemotional gym leader suddenly laughing, smiling and making open conversation was definitely odd, he would be one of the first to admit that it was an extremely welcome abnormality that Ash could tell made her mother and father very happy. Also, and it was something he would never say to anyone, but seeing the way in which Sabrina's face would light up anytime she smiled or laughed gave her a rather substantial measure of attractiveness. In that there was really no denying and, even if only to himself, Ash would admit to it freely. All in all, it had been a very rewarding night that all of them had enjoyed, but once they got back to the gym and went to bed hours later, the girls sharing the bed while Ash and Brock slept on the 2 couches, everyone practically passed out and didn't even crack their eyes open until late the next morning. Arriving in the kitchen and coming to an end with his thoughts, Ash saw Giselle, Misty, Soledad and Sabrina sitting together talking at the table while Gerald, Helen and Brock made what smelled like breakfast with the food that Sabrina's old illusionary servants had made sure to keep the kitchen stocked with. Walking in with a cheerful, "Morning everyone," Ash was greeted in return by several equally as enthusiastic morning greetings as he took a seat at the table across from Sabrina and beside Giselle. "Did you sleep well, Ash?" Sabrina asked nicely from where she was sitting while still in her purple night top and black undershorts. "Yeah, definitely," he answered with a smile. "Man, I was practically dead to the world. Right, Pi?" he finished while looking up at his Pokémon, who gave a simple chirp and smile in reply. "Well, I hope all of you are hungry," Gerald announced as he poured what looked like orange juice into several glasses near the fridge. "My wife makes a mean breakfast." Helen giggled and playfully swatted her husband's shoulder with the spatula in her hand from where she was standing near the stove. "Oh, you. And besides, Brock here has proven to be a big help and quite an accomplished cook himself." The boy in question turned around and rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment as he brought a bowl of Pokémon food over for Pikachu. "Ah, I was just helping out because I love to cook." Setting down Pikachu's food on the table as the electric type hopped atop its surface with a happy trill and began digging into the food that Ash had long ago specially formulated for him. Brock smiled and scratched his friend's Pokémon behind the ears as Misty rolled her eyes and smiled. "Don't listen to Brock, he's just being modest. He cooks for us all the time on the road along with Ash and both of them are really good." "Yeah, and he makes great pancakes too," Giselle said with her mouth all but watering at the thought of Brock's famous buttermilk pancakes. Soledad chuckled. "Well, he started young. When we were kids Brock here used to love making mud pies, so I suppose it's only fitting he grew up to be a fine cook." Everyone shared a laugh at that as Brock whined Soledad's name and hung his head in shame. Chuckling heartily while he helped his wife carry the food over to the table, Gerald shook his head and announced boisterously, "Don't let em get to you, Brock. Finding one's passion so young is never a bad thing. You should be proud of it." "Indeed," Helen agreed with a smile as she took her seat beside Sabrina. "If you have a passion for something, just go for it and explore it and never let anyone hold you back." She then reached out and stroked her daughter's hair. "Just like our Sabrina here, if you don't give up on your dreams then you can accomplish anything. That determination is what made her a gym leader so young." Sabrina merely smiled and blushed faintly at her mother's gushing as her father sat down on her other side and rubbed his hands together. "All right everyone, let's eat." As the sizable group began enjoying the delicious and nutritious breakfast prepared chiefly by Helen and Brock, they occasionally stopped and made small talk in between bites. "So then Sabrina," Ash began after he swallowed a mouthful of egg. "What do you plan on doing concerning the gym now? Are you gonna shut it down for a while so you can take time to adjust and get back in the swing of things or what?" The psychic prodigy wiped her mouth with her napkin and shook her head. "Actually, no, I am not Ash. While I am very glad to have my family in my life back and fully intend to spend as much time with them as possible, I still have duties as a gym leader that doesn't go away no matter what happens to me. Besides, there's no better way to get myself back into the feel of being a full-time gym leader with a clear mind than by battling new challengers and training with my Pokémon anytime I have the chance." Ash nodded in respect and admiration of Sabrina's answer, a feeling that he could tell was shared by Gerald and Helen as they smiled proudly at their daughter. "Well Sabrina, I'm glad to hear it and I'm sure you'll do great. If you don't mind me asking," Brock asked curiously as he changed the subject. "What are you going to do about the mess in Sabrina's room? That's a lot of damage and it'll take forever to clean up and repair." Gerald took a drink of his coffee and shook his head. "Not to worry Brock, a simple call to the Pokémon League and they'll have someone out here to repair the damage in no time. This is a league-controlled and owned gym mind you, so it's their responsibility to keep up with the maintenance of their facilities." "But what about the type of damage sustained?" Soledad questioned, whom was still in her own red sleeping shorts and maroon-colored spaghetti shirt. "Surely questions will be asked and an investigation launched when they see a whole destroyed house in Sabrina's room and the entire front wall demolished." Gerald held his hand up. "That's why we'll clean up the mess ourselves and clear it totally out so only the damage of Sabrina's room itself will be left behind for them to fix. Afterwards we'll simply say that one of Sabrina's psychic Pokémon was having a hard time controlling its power after evolving in a match and accidentally destroyed Sabrina's room in an accidental outburst. Her Abra just evolved and it's a known fact that sometimes Pokémon don't react well to evolution at first, so I know they would buy it. I hate to lie but we can't hardly tell them the truth, no one would believe us. Even still though, how are you going to actually clean up all of that debris in there?" Giselle asked in a tone that showed both confusion and bewilderment. "Some of that stuff probably weighs over 1,000 pounds. Sabrina took that question however as she finished taking a bite of toast. "That part will be easy actually. My Pokémon can handle eliminating all of the mess themselves after my parents and I pick through whatever valuables may remain in the ruins of our old home." "How?" Ash asked curiously. "Are they just gonna make it disappear? How would that even work? Wouldn't it just end up somewhere else?" Sabrina smiled at the boy who was the catalyst behind saving her life and provided an answer to his confusion. "Remember Ash, psychic abilities, telekinesis, are practically limitless in their application. For the most part, Psychics use their powers by bending the existing cosmic energy around us all to their will in order to do extraordinary things like create illusions, levitate, move objects at their discretion and even control people's minds. She took a sip of her juice. However, psychic Pokémon are much more in tune with their powers and can actually take it a step further. They can actually bend the energy around inanimate, non-existent objects and compress it to the point where they can literally destroy it. Essentially, if they focus enough, a psychic type can actually destroy objects entirely given long enough to do so. Understanding lit in Ash's eyes. And that's how you'll get rid of all the damage. You'll just have them destroy it all with their abilities. Sabrina tilted her head in his direction. Exactly. But it will be a long process though, since even with 3 psychic Pokémon working together it will still take quite a while to permanently destroy so much debris. Gerald sighed. It will be a shame to destroy what's left of our old house, but sometimes the old has to die to give birth to the new, and in light of everything that's happened, I think that is fitting. And besides, it will pave the way for me to eventually do something that I believe will make saying goodbye to our old home that much easier. Taking his wife's hand, who smiled at him, Gerald looked at Ash and the others and then decided to explain his intentions. The 3 of us stayed up quite a while last night discussing it, and I think that after we have a chance to really reconnect as a family again, I'm going to open up my photography business again. Except this time I'm going to base it right out of the gym here so that I can be close to my family all the time and maybe even get Sabrina's gym more visitors. Perhaps even challengers. It will be good for both of our respective endeavors and we get to be close together at the same time. It's a win-win. Sabrina's mother giggled at her husband's excitement and then added her own input. The money this gym brings in from the Pokémon League due to Sabrina's wonderful work as a gym leader all these years will allow us to slowly remodel and not only put my husband's business in here but also renovate certain parts of the gym into more permanent living quarters so we can just live here in the same comfort as we would any house. Giselle smiled brightly. Ah, that sounds so awesome. I really hope you can make it happen. What about your cabin though? Ash asked Gerald curiously. The older man merely shrugged. I'll keep it up. We were thinking that maybe we could use it when we wanted to get away from the city for a while and just escape out into the country for a little relaxation time. Ash's face morphed from one of curious interest to sincere happiness for the reunited family sitting across from him. I'm so happy for you guys. It sounds like you have a really good plan worked out for the 3 of you, and I'm sure it'll work great once you get everything off the ground with the whole business and remodeling thing. Gerald, Helen and Sabrina all joined hands as the beaming father just squeezed their hands affectionately and nodded. I'm sure it will. Nothing can stand in our way now that we're back together, and as long as I'm alive, we'll never be separated in such a way again. After that, they all fell back into a peaceful silence while eating their food until, once a few minutes went by, Brock pointed to a small TV sitting on a cabinet shelf a few feet away from the table on Sabrina's side that was turned on but with the volume low. Hey, can someone turn that up please? It looks they're making some kind of big announcement on the news. Gerald got up and turned the volume higher on the TV until the curly blonde-haired woman who was wearing a red suit and giving the news could be heard louder. Her professional, standard, news voice, being heard clearly now as she spoke into the mic held below her mouth even as Ash and everyone else noticed exactly where she was standing in front of. Hey, isn't that Sylph Company? Misty asked aloud. Yeah, Ash said leaning forward in his chair more. Me and Brock were just there the other day. I wonder what it could be about. Helen questioned as she turned in her chair. Knowing full well from living in Saffron City for so many years that news crews usually only gathered outside of the multi-billion credit company when something big was about to be announced. No one spoke to give a reply though, and simply turned all their attention towards the TV as the reporter continued to talk with headlines that read, "Breaking news from Sylph Company," flashing along the bottom of the screen directly below her. Today in a surprise press conference, President and CEO of the world-renowned research and development company Sylph Company, creators and developers of many of the household appliances and otherwise that are used by the general public every day, made an important and very urgent announcement concerning a brand new product software that is scheduled for release sometime in the following month. While she continued to speak, the scene on the screen changed until recorded video of the press conference began playing and showed a room full of reporters in a large conference room. They were all listening intently to the announcement that was being made by a middle-aged, slightly portly man who was standing up on stage in front of a podium dressed in an expensive-looking brown suit with a white mustache and equally white hair on the sides and back of his head only. To his immediate flank the man was guarded by blue-uniformed security guards, and to his direct right holding a briefcase was a sandy blonde-haired woman that had her hair pulled up into two buns at the back with a yellow hair band through the middle of it. She wore a purple button-up blazer with a white blouse underneath of it, a white skirt, peach pantyhose and black low-heeled shoes on her feet. The woman appeared to be in her early to mid-20s and was most likely the president's assistant if her position beside of him meant anything important at all. According to details given at today's press conference, the new product will be an augmented reality game of sorts where players will get to capture their own virtual, 4D-based Pokémon using the camera function on just about any handheld device with satellite, internet-compatible software. Details about the product and how it works were also given and explained that consumers will be provided with GPS coordinates that works in conjunction with the clock feature on all mobile devices in order to find specific locations dictated by satellite all around the region at certain times. Upon arriving at the marked capture zones, players will be given the chance to capture whatever number of Pokémon has been chosen to appear in that designated location with Pokeballs that are provided to them as per standard after downloading the free app. Upon capture of their virtual quarries, fans of this new product will then have the ability to battle virtual gym leaders, whose gyms also appear at certain locations, as well as against their friends. They will even be able to trade with other trainers, and have a limited degree of interaction with their faux Pokémon. Another feature, which is the only thing players will supposedly have to pay for concerning this new product, are specific locations known as Pokestops, where purchase of extra Pokeballs and other real-life Pokémon training items found at Pokemarts, as well as Pokémon eggs, will be available. This reporter understands that upon release of the new software, attainability of the downloadable application can be found at all participating Pokemarts located throughout the region. Consumers will merely have to download the software to their devices on site and then go on their way afterwards with no payment or terms of agreement necessary. The ambitious new product that now has Pokémon enthusiasts everywhere gripping at the edges of their seats in barely contained excitement has been given the name Pokémon Go by its developers, and for now, is only slated for release in Kanto. The president of the company who made the announcement today divulged that this is a lifelong dream coming true for himself, and was quoted as saying that he also has the hopes of this product inspiring more social interaction amongst the general public. And the TV went quiet again as Gerald turned it back down and everyone simply sat there at the table in a mixture of shock and dumbfounded disbelief. Eventually, however, Sabrina became the first to break the silence as she stated in a flat, deadpan voice, "That makes absolutely no sense." She tilted her head to the side as though she was trying to figure out a great equation. Why would anyone want to walk around with their faces buried in a gadget, catching fake Pokémon, when they could just go and capture a real one around practically any corner? Yeah, Misty agreed as she sat back and crossed her arms with a huff. Catching virtual Pokémon is all fine and good, but it doesn't have the same emotional reward or skillful gain as when you actually catch a real-life one. No matter how good it is, no software program will ever be better than the real deal. Not to mention there's no substitute for raising your Pokémon and growing alongside them as you both mature, Giselle chimed in as she reached over and rubbed Pikachu behind the ears. An action that caused said Pokémon to push his head into her hand and coo in contentment. You can't form a real bond with some computer-created graphic image, only real Pokémon can create those feelings in someone. Soledad and even Gerald and Helen nodded in agreement as Ash rolled his eyes and sighed. I don't get it either. I'd much rather have my Pokémon than a bunch of fake ones any day of the week. Putting a hand to his chin, Brock hummed thoughtfully and nodded. I understand where you guys are coming from and I agree with you, but I think the reason why Sylph Company did this is for all the people who's always wanted to have their own Pokémon but lack the know-how, skills or even courage to do so. He shrugged. I mean, think about it. Starting a journey with living Pokémon and being totally on your own is a scary thing. I'm sure a lot of people want to do it but just don't have what it takes to go out and make it happen. I think this Pokémon Go thing is for those same people who want a Pokémon, no matter what kind it is, but not the hardships and oftentimes emotionally, mentally and physically stressful responsibilities that go along with it. Smiling, the teen let out a small chuckle. I guess this new game thing is for all the Pokémon fanatics that want a Pokémon themselves but just not the constant hard work that comes with the territory. I don't think it's a bad thing, I just think it's something meant to cater to everyone who simply don't have the stuff needed to be real trainers. Ash shook his head and stood up while smiling. Well, then they can keep their virtual stuff because I've got real Pokémon to pick up at the Pokémon Center, a call I've gotta make back home to the lab and an official gym battle to get to. My day's pretty full and I ain't gonna sit around wasting it away. Sabrina stood up as well. Yes, I need to get ready as well so I can also go and pick up my own Pokémon. Ash's friends all stood from their chairs, knowing they needed to do the same, and individually took care of their dishes along with Ash and Sabrina. Once finished cleaning up everything a short time later, Gerald spoke from the table where he and Helen were sitting together again. A fresh cup of coffee in both of their hands. You kids go ahead and enjoy the day. I think Helen and I are just going to stay around here and enjoy each other's company for the first time in a very long while. A little alone time as it were, I think we desperately need it. Helen nodded and smiled at Sabrina and the others. Yes, darling, you go and have a good time with Ash and everyone else today. Your father and I are just going to stay here and maybe just laze around all day. Sabrina simply nodded as she walked over and hugged her parents. Very well, I love you both. I'll see you soon. Returning the hug, Gerald and Helen then wished a good day to Ash and his friends before the group of talented young trainers left to go back to their rooms so they could prepare for the day ahead. Seeing the kids all disappear down the hallway from the kitchen, Gerald leaned over and kissed his wife's cheek before whispering mischievously, "Now, what say you and me go play photographer in the bedroom once they're gone, my love? I recall you always did so well at that game." The brown-haired woman blushed faintly before lightly slapping her husband's arm and admonishing him half-heartedly, "Oh, behave, you dirty man, you." The bearded man in question just laughed heartily and began playfully attacking his wife with nips to her neck, which caused the brunette to throw her head back and giggle mirthfully at the actions provided by her loving husband. One thing was for sure, it was going to be a very nice day for everyone. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 2 hours later found Ash, his friends and Sabrina all standing before the Saffron City Fighting Dojo. A traditional design by build with a quite impressive size that spanned about half of the lot it was located in. Stepping inside through the double sliding doors that made up the front entrance, the group of 6 were greeted to the sight of several ripped, sweating men dressed in white gis and different colored headbands, grunting, shouting and vocalizing in several forms while they worked out by themselves and also with the many different fighting-type Pokémon spread throughout the gym. The dojo itself was like a huge square with a wide-open floor that was made of standard wood flooring, while the walls were all colored white with wood slats to resemble changing screens. The ceiling above was normal white tile that was made to also resemble changing screen, except it was clearly tile save for the shape and texture. All throughout the gym hanging bags, standing bags, speed bags, wooden katanas, staffs and several other types of non-lethal weaponry were set up for use and was getting that use currently by all of the traditionally garbed martial artists and their Pokémon that were training together intensely. Some who were running through katas, some were sparring, and others whom were even working on weapon-style forms if they weren't already making good use of the many bags that littered the sides of the dojo. Putting her hand over her nose, Giselle made a disgusted face and stuck her tongue out. "Ew, it smells nasty in here." Soledad crossed her arms and looked around. "What do you expect? It's bunch of sweaty meatheads who probably haven't bathed in days all congregated together under the same roof." Misty made a fake throwing up action in her mouth. "Like a mixing pot of bad BO and filthy gym socks, nasty." Looking around with a face of genuine question and confusion, Sabrina ventured forth in a stoic voice that relayed the complete lack of understanding she felt. "I haven't the faintest clue why anyone would want to bash their knuckles on rough bags, swing sticks around and throw one another on the ground for no immediately foreseeable purpose besides some misplaced sense of self-achievement." Ash shrugged as he looked around. I don't know. I like martial arts myself, but I've never been as flashy or theatrical when I'm training." Brock nodded with a serious expression upon his face as he crossed his arms. "You're right, Ash. None of these men have the same sense of style, ability or grace as the great Master Bruno." Everyone turned to look at Brock with expressions of confusion, but before anyone could ask him about the out-place comment he just made, one of the men in geese with black hair came walking over to them after he finished training with his Machamp. "Newcomers, I see. Did you come to work out with us or are you lost?" he asked with a slightly arrogant smile upon his face. "We usually don't get such small, weak-looking kids coming to our dojo." Sabrina quirked an eyebrow as she responded emotionlessly, "You judge people based off of their physical stature and appearance. Well, I suppose that answers the unspoken question regarding the size of your brain and its cerebral capacities then." The man blinked a few times dumbly before it apparently finally registered to him that he was being insulted and got angry. "You trying to tell me something, little girl?" Sabrina just stared at him like she was looking at an oversized, mentally special lab experiment and replied nonplussed, "Not in any way or that fashion you would likely perceive, no." Just before the black belt wearing man could step into her face and say something nasty to Sabrina, Ash moved in front of her and said in a polite but stern tone, "Actually, sir, I'm here to challenge the leader of this dojo." "Is he here?" The short-tempered man looked down at Ash and smirked. "You're here to challenge Master Kyo." Throwing his head back, the man laughed. "Please. The master would destroy you without even trying, you little bug, and besides, no one challenges the karate master without going through all of us first. And I doubt you could even beat me in a one-on-one." Ash, instead of rising to the man's taunts, just held up the Pokeball that he had sent Ghastly away for. "How about we have a battle then to decide just how worthy I am of challenging your master?" Smirking once more, the man just shrugged and then walked back over to his Machamp while calling over his shoulder, "Fine, but don't go crying when we cream you." As the rest of the practitioners all stepped away in order to give them space to battle, Ash's friends and Sabrina did the same. "Beat him to a pulp, Ash," Misty yelled out with ferocity in her tone. "Yeah, no mercy," Giselle shouted in agreement. Ash didn't offer any reply though, as he held out the Pokeball in his hand and stared down the arrogant karate student and his equally as arrogant-looking Machamp. Enlarging the Pokeball, Ash simply side-tossed it while announcing, "Primate, let's show them what we can do." As the pig monkey Pokémon appeared from his ball and simply materialized on one knee with a focused, controlled expression on his face instead of jumping and thrashing around wildly like most of his species would do, Ash crossed his arms and put his mind into immediate battle mode. "Primate buddy," he addressed his Pokémon. "This is what you've been training for all this time. A chance to show off your abilities and strength. Remember to stay focused, clear-headed and locked onto nothing but the battle. I know you can do this because I have every faith in the world in you. Are you ready, my friend?" The boy's only fighting-type Pokémon just looked back at him and then nodded, showing a definite feeling of respect for his trainer that was also unusual for his species. A feeling that had only grown when, after Ash had him sent over from the lab at the Pokémon Center, the two of them went into the center's gym and then sat side by side and meditated, focusing their minds and bodies on the task at hand while bringing their hearts and souls closer together as trainer and Pokémon through that deep moment of spiritual reflection. Ash was big on training Primate not only to become much stronger and a better fighter but also to become far more at one and at peace with himself as well. He knew that Primape's species were prone to fits of rage and uncontrolled anger, and that's why he had at one point, before sending him to the lab for a time, taught Primate meditation and then made it a staple of his training program. Meaning that the fighting type had to meditate every day for at least 1 hour after training to help calm his aggressive spirit and become more clear of mind. A tactic which was proven to be working wonders if Primape's current calm, cool demeanor and focused personality were anything to go by. Directing his full attention to their opponent, Ash called out, "Okay, we're ready." Smirking once more, the man raised his hand and pointed at them. "You're gonna get pulverized, little boy." Machamp used Dynamic Punch. Flexing its muscles and smashing its fists together, the four-armed Pokémon raised its head and called out its name before charging at Primate with all of its muscly appendages glowing. Even as the much larger Pokémon drew close, Ash and Primate didn't make any moves until it was just a short distance away. As soon as it was, however, only then did Ash command, "Primate, use evasion." Moving at incredibly quick speeds, Primate moved his head to the side just as one of Machamp's fists went soaring past it. The next punch that came in he simply sidestepped, the third one he jumped over, and the last one Primate dodged by backflipping out of the way. Seeing this and becoming temporarily surprised at the other fighting type's quick movements, the arrogant martial artist regained his sour disposition mere seconds later and then yelled out another command, Machamp use cross chop. Bringing its hands up in front of its face, Machamp took off at Primeape with a bellow of its name and then brought all four hands up before swinging them downward at impressive speeds. However, just before Machamp could get into reach of Primeape, the focused Pokémon simply jumped and ran over top of Machamp's hands in a single leap each before pushing off of its back and landing on the floor behind it. Now feeling frustrated at his usually unbeatable Machamp being unable to land a single punch, the black belt grew impatient and angry as he shouted in a growl, "Use Mega Punch Machamp and don't stop until that little pipsqueak is down on the floor." Feeling just as agitated and aggressive as its trainer at being unable to simply lay the smaller Pokémon out in a single punch, Machamp roared and then ran at Primeape while raining multiple glowing white fists down at him that were all in rapid succession. For Primeape though, a Pokémon in control, it was only too easy to dodge the larger Pokémon's blows that were quickly starting to grow sloppier and sloppier the more it attacked him. Dodging, twisting, sidestepping and jumping like he could almost foresee each attack before it came, Primeape made seemingly easy work of evading the punches all while Machamp grew more and more unstable and volatile. After several minutes of this continued on, with Primeape leading Machamp around practically the entire dojo while dodging its attacks, the muscle-headed black belt gritted his teeth and all but screamed, "Machamp, stop playing around and use Vital Throw." Knowing what Machamp was about to do but deciding not to make any immediately outward movements for the sake of strategy, Ash yelled, "Primeape, don't move." Listening to his trainer, Primeape allowed Machamp to grab hold of him with its four strong arms and then felt the muscly Pokémon jump high up into the air. Smirking since he felt certain that they were about to win, the arrogant karate student shouted, "End it with one final toss, Machamp." Just as the four-armed Pokémon let Primeape go with two arms so that it could hoist him over its head with the other two to throw the pig-monkey Pokémon, Ash called out, "Now Primeape. Legs to ceiling." Moving quick as a flash, Primeape dropped his left elbow down and smashed it into Machamp's face hard enough to cause the bigger Pokémon to let him go. After that, Primeape immediately twisted himself around and used Machamp's shoulders as springboards to launch himself higher up into the air until he was level with the ceiling. From there, Primeape placed his feet atop the ceiling's surface just long enough to launch himself back downward again towards Machamp like a bullet. Knowing that he and Primeape were in good enough sync to issue the next command with enough time, Ash yelled, "Primeape, use Mega Punch." Just before Primeape could impact with Machamp who was still in the air, he cocked his fist back until it started glowing a bright white color. Not wasting any time though, Ash's Pokémon brought his fist down and smashed it into the other fighting type's face hard enough to send spittle flying from Machamp's mouth as it grunted in pain and soared towards the ground. Impacting the dojo floor below with a loud crashing sound just as Primeape landed a few feet away on both feet, Machamp crumpled like a limp noodle to the ground and lay where he landed without any sign of getting up. The cocky and unkind black belt looked at his downed Pokémon with wide eyes as he put his hands on his head and reared back. "Impossible. There's no way." Looking over at Ash and Primeape, who appeared calm and in control still from where they were standing, the man returned his Pokémon and growled before looking back at his fellow students. "What are you idiots waiting for? Teach that little punk not to mess with us." The other black belts didn't seem too unsure of the idea at first, but when their furious peer turned towards them with rage on his face and demanded, "What the hell are you waiting for? Do it or you'll be sorry." They all snapped to attention and did as commanded out of no small measure of fear for the man who had unofficially named himself second in command of the gym. Running out onto the middle of the floor, the several other black belts all released multiple fighting types at once like Machoke, Machop, Tyrogue, Hitmontop, Meditite, Makuhita and even a Mankey. As the fighting Pokémon all surrounded Primeape, Misty yelled indignantly with her fist raised, "Hey, 7-on-1 isn't fair." But she was cut off by Ash who called back calmly, "It's okay Misty, just relax, we've got this." Sharing a look with Primeape, who looked back at Ash, they both allowed a moment of silent communication to pass between them before the trusting trainer simply gave a nod to his Pokémon. Understanding what this meant, Primeape looked back at his opponents and cracked his neck just as the first one came charging at him with a shout of its name. Primip immediately began dodging the quick attacks being thrown at him by Machoke before grabbing one of its arms and then stepping in with a side block, effectively smashing his fist into the other Pokémon's gut, which sent it flying backwards. Sensing another one moving in on him, Primip turned around and looked just as Hitmontop came flying in with a mega kick. Stepping back, Primip caught the other Pokémon's outstretched leg in a tight hold with arms near his side and then spun it around several times before tossing Hitmontop towards Machop, who had been running in to attack him from behind. As both fighting types collided with one another and flew back, Makuhita came dropping from the air with both hands raised above its head, which it quickly slammed down at Primip. Ash's Pokémon was quick to react though and backflipped out of the way just as Mankey came charging in with its eyes blazing red and muscles bulging, showing that it was using rage. Primip quickly began rapidly dodging all of the attacks being thrown his way by his pre-evolved cousin before, once he had an opening, dropped down and sweep the smaller Pokémon's legs with a low kick. Grabbing Mankey's legs as it fell to the ground, Primip then turned around and used his living mace to bash Makuhita away just as the plump fighting type came towards him with a palm extended. Jumping in the air afterwards, Primip wrapped Mankey up and then soared towards the ground with his pre-evolved form wrapped tightly in his arms. Just before hitting the ground, Primip let go and jumped away while putting the seismic toss he had just utilized to work as Mankey hit the ground with a heavy thud and cracked the wood floor. Hands out in front of him, Primip shifted his eyes back and forth as his many now angered, winded and injured opponents quickly got back up and closed in on him at one time. Having learned their lesson and no longer wanting to fight him one-on-one, the several other fighting types all converged on Primip slowly until he was backed into a tight circle. "This is bad," Giselle fretted. "He's totally surrounded." Sabrina and Soledad didn't say anything though and just kept their attention locked on the battle while Brock shook his head and replied, "Don't count Ash and Primip out just because they're outnumbered, Misty. They can still come out on top yet, just watch." At that moment, just before the fighting Pokémon all attacked, Ash thought in his mind, "You can do this, Primip, just have faith in yourself. I know you can do it." Almost as though Primip could hear his trainer's thoughts, a small smile came across his face and he nodded slightly just as his opponents all gave a loud bellow and charged him at one time. Letting his mind and body go into pure instinctual overdrive and with a heavy faith on all the intense training he had been doing, Primip allowed himself to move on pure muscle memory as he began moving like a blur of cream-colored fur and fast-moving limbs. His eyes even closed as he simply let his senses and instincts become his only method for seeing. With every fast punch, kick and powerful attack sent his way in the mass of flailing limbs, Primip would move just a little bit faster and allow his arms and legs to block, parry and cancel out each blow like water running over rocks. When punches would rain in upon him, Primip would dodge down, to the side, up and sideways while his hands moved in fast circles and whirlwinds. Not only would he stop the incoming attacks but with each block performed, Primip would quickly turn it into a counter. Doing this by either dislocating the joint of whatever arm he had in his hold, stepping in and punching or force palming his opponent away, low kicking it, launching it away with a kick to the face or gut, or even performing a small rapid combo of quick punches and kicks that would knock whoever it was away from him several feet back. With every strike the other fighting types would throw at Primip, the intensely focused Pokémon would block, counter and send them hurling away. The sounds of grunting, groaning, fists and feet impacting skin and bodies hitting the ground was the only predominant sound that filled the dojo for the next several minutes. As his opponents would get back up progressively slower each time and run back in to attack him again, Primip grew faster and faster in his movements due to how focused, centered and intent the pig-monkey Pokémon now was in the multi-opponent battle. As the seconds ticked by, his body became like a blur as his feet and hands moved as though they were made of lightning itself. Dozens of kicks, punches, fast blocks, dodges, jumps and other complex counters all being utilized with near-perfect precision the more Primip fought until, eventually, every other fighting type was on the ground beaten, bruised, unconscious and battered except for one. The last Pokémon still standing was Machoke, who looked to be in very bad condition with one arm no longer in use due to a hyperextension courtesy of Primip, one eye swollen shut, one leg all but totally stiff behind him and several large, purple bruises covering his body. Obviously hesitant to approach the one Pokémon fighting force that had decimated it and its comrades, Machoke kept trying to find other angles in which it could move in and attack Primeape, but every time it moved, Ash's Pokémon would do the same like a mirror. However, when Primeape held his hand out and did a "come here" gesture, Machoke's pride and anger got the best of it and caused the massively ripped Pokémon to just charge its target with blind fury in its eyes and one hand raised up and poised to slam itself down onto Primeape's skull. Closing his eyes once more before his opponent could reach him, Primeape rooted himself to the ground and focused his senses on each heavy, thudding step Machoke would take as it approached him. Arms coming out to the side, Primeape finally moved just before Machoke could make contact with the fist that it had positioned to perform serious damage to him. Stepping very lightly to the side with a sliding motion so he could still maintain his root, Primeape threw Machoke completely off balance by outward blocking its punch away in a pushing motion that knocked the bigger Pokémon's center of gravity completely off. Just as Machoke started to teeter and sidestep due to his loss of balance, Primeape stepped back around in a backwards spin and came in front of his opponent while smashing an elbow into the middle of its abdominals. Just as Machoke lurched forward and its eyes bugged out from the painful elbow it had sustained to the gut, Primeape pulled his fists into his body and then twisted to each side, right and left, while throwing two fast, powerful hooks into both of Machoke's chiseled obliques, causing the bipedal fighting type to cringe to either side from the rib-creaking blows. Immediately afterwards, Primeape reached up and grabbed Machoke around the neck before pulling it down repeatedly where its face would then meet each of his knees in rapid succession. Machoke's head becoming like a paddle ball as it snapped back with every vicious blow to the face. Finally, just as Machoke was starting to stumble back now totally off balance, Primeape stepped in and began rapidly beating the other Pokémon's stomach with punches that became progressively harder, faster and more powerful with each rotation the fists made. Even when Machoke finally hit the ground, Primeape followed it down and continued rapidly punching the other fighting type's gut while Machoke's body moved up and down uncontrollably from the force of the blows it was enduring. Finally, with one final twist to the side and a punch to Machoke's face, the volley of meaty-sounding thwacks that came with the barrage of merciless hits came to an abrupt end. Primeape's final opponent flopping out bonelessly on the ground while its body continued to faintly twitch, convulse and struggle in phantom pain from the after effects of the intense beating it had received. Standing back up slowly, Primeape stood in the center of his now beaten, battered opponents which lay in a widespread circle around him. His fists bruised and red from all of the relentless striking to hard skin that they had been forced to perform. The other black belts all looked to be in a state of total disbelief and shock that their Pokémon had been defeated so easily and soundlessly by one lone Primeape. Anger quickly replacing that shock as they returned their Pokémon, they all then converged upon Ash and Primeape with the first man that had challenged them as the ringleader of it all. Stepping back to defend his trainer in case things went badly, Primeape brought his fists up and stared the men down challengingly as he stood just a few feet in front of Ash, daring any of the men to take a single step closer unless they wanted to meet the same fate as their Pokémon did. Ash himself took a similar defensive position in case things did indeed go bad while his friends, Soledad and Sabrina all appeared weary and a little nervous as to just how the very volatile situation everything had become was about to now go down. Their hands reaching for their Pokeballs to be ready just in case things did indeed erupt into an all-out fight and they needed assistance. Watching all of the angered and embarrassed martial artists wearily, Ash tried to placate the situation as he spoke in a calm, even tone. "Everyone, let's just calm down. This is stupid to get involved in an all-out fight just because you lost a battle. Now why don't you step back, cool down and we can all." Unfortunately, he was interrupted suddenly by the instigator of the whole affair stepping forward and pointing at Ash with a furious gleam of anger in his eyes and rage on his face. The arrogant and obviously sore loser of a black belt all but spitting venom as he cut Ash off as though nothing he had to say mattered. "Why don't you shut the hell up, little boy? You think you can just come in here and humiliate us and then expect everything to just be okay? Well, we're gonna show you not to mess with the Saffron City Fighting Dojo." The man cracked his knuckles after saying that as he and the other black belts all advanced closer while Ash, Primeape and even Pikachu, who had left Ash's shoulder by this point and was now on the ground sparking his cheeks angrily as a warning, prepared themselves for what was sure to be an all-out brawl. Even Brock and the others had now moved closer to Ash with their Pokeballs out and enlarged in order to back up their friend if need be. However, Just before things could explode, a loud, stern and commanding voice shouted angrily from the room behind the main dojo training area, "No more." As soon as the shout was heard, everyone stopped and the men blocking Ash and his friends in stepped aside so the back wall where the voice came from could be seen. There, behind a sliding door that had two plaques on either side of it which read, "Struggle for Vengeance," and, "A Complicated Fracture," a man suddenly emerged who was dressed in the same white GI black belt attire as the others but with slightly longer black hair, a red fighting band around his forehead and eyes that were very similar to Brock's own. The man seemed to be around his mid-30s perhaps. Walking out into the main practice area slowly, the stern and no-nonsense looking man approached Ash and everyone else with a look on his face that went a long way to show just how angry he was. All manner of aggressive tendencies and arrogant cockiness immediately left the younger black belts who seemed to shrink back and recluse in on themselves as soon as the older man walked out into the middle of them. Looking between Ash, his friends and then to the men who were dressed similarly to himself, the squinty-eyed serious man demanded gruffly, "Someone had better explain to me right now why my meditation was interrupted by the sounds of fighting that had nothing to do with training or battling." Almost right away, the man who had instigated the fight with Ash stepped forward and pointed an accusing finger at them all. "Master, those kids came in here trying to stir up trouble and break the peaceful tranquility of our dojo." Misty became irate at the outright lie and yelled indignantly while pointing in return at the conceited black belt, "That's nothing but a big fat lie. We got here with no intention to start trouble whatsoever and then you came over and started insulting us and talking to us like we were Donphan shit on the bottom of your foot." "Yeah, you lying meathead." Giselle joined in. "And then you had everyone else team up on Ash and Primip after they beat you in Machamp fair and square." At those words, a spark of realization suddenly came over the face of who was now revealed to be the master of the dojo as he spun around and glared at the younger man. "Kenji, what have I told you about harassing challengers that come to our dojo? Just because they may not train with us does not mean they are not welcome here. Now this is the last time I will warn you about this, stop trying to chase away our visitors." The man in question lowered his head and nodded while speaking in a respectful tone, "Yes, master. I understand." The leader of the dojo just pointed away towards the far wall and commanded without pity, "Sorry does not cut it this time, Kenji, you need to be punished. Now go and hold deep wall squats until you collapse." Not looking at his master, the admonished young black belt just nodded again and then ran off to complete the punishment task assigned to him for his actions. After dealing with Kenji, the master then turned to the rest of his students and put his hands on his hips. "And as for the rest of you, there is no excuse for any of you listening to Kenji and doing what I have expressly forbade. As recompense, you will join him for the same punishment and for the same duration of time. Now go." All of the students gave their master the same show of bowed respect and then ran to join Kenji on the wall as the master himself walked over to Ash and his friends. Stopping before them, he bowed his head lowly with hands by his sides as he spoke in an apologetic tone. "I am deeply sorry for the actions of my students. They are still young in the ways of our sacred art and have yet to learn how to control the aggressive spirits that reside within their hearts. You have my apologies." Ash gave his own bow, except with his hands out in front of him, as he replied in a polite manner, "Thank you for your sincere remorse and I hold no ill feelings towards your dojo. I understand that martial arts is a great responsibility and can also go to someone's head if they are not careful." Raising back